Listen to me carefully, because what I'm about to tell you will burn into your memory like acid on skin. My name is Brenda, I'm 34 years old, and 3 months ago my own blood declared war on my children. Your kids can eat whatever scraps are left in the kitchen, they're not guests here. Those words came from my mother's mouth like venom, dripping with contempt for my 8 and 10-year-old babies who had done nothing but exist in her presence. My sister Amanda leaned back in her chair, smirking like she'd just won some twisted lottery. And don't forget, I'm staying all week, so you're covering my meals too. The entitlement in her voice made my stomach turn, but it was my father who delivered the killing blow. Now go set the table like a good little servant. He didn't even look up from his newspaper when he said it, like I was nothing more than hired help who happened to share his DNA. That was the moment I learned that even family can turn your children into outsiders. That was the moment everything changed forever. Before we go any further into this nightmare, I need you to do something. Drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in the United Kingdom, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in Australia, I want to know. Don't just sit there absorbing my pain like some passive observer. Tell me where in the world you are, because what happened to me could happen to anyone, anywhere. Now, let's dive into the story that destroyed my faith in family and rebuild it in ways I never expected. The silence that followed my father's command was deafening. My children, Emma and Jake, sat frozen at the kitchen table where they'd been coloring, their crayons suddenly still in their small hands. I could see the confusion in Emma's eyes, the way her bottom lip started to tremble when she realized something was terribly wrong but couldn't understand what. Jake, my 10-year-old protector, straightened his shoulders and reached for his sister's hand. I left quietly. What else could I do? Fight in front of my children and give these people more ammunition to hurt them? No. I gathered our things with steady hands while my heart hammered against my ribs like a caged bird. The tension in that house was so thick you could taste it, bitter and metallic, like blood in your mouth after you've bitten your tongue too hard. We drove home in silence, but it was the kind of silence that screams. Finally, Emma's small voice broke through from the back seat. Mommy, why doesn't Grandma like us? How do you answer that question? How do you explain to a child that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most are the ones who cut you deepest? I said nothing because what could I say? That Grandma was wrong? That would be a lie. Grandma meant every cruel word. That it wasn't about them? Another lie. It was absolutely about them, about me, about everything we represented that didn't fit into their perfect little world. When we got home, I sat in our guest room, the room I had prepared so carefully for this visit, with fresh sheets and flowers from our garden. Now it echoed with emptiness, mocking me with its unused perfection. The neighbors had already started their whispered conversations over fence lines. I could feel their judgment seeping through the walls. She must have done something wrong. Family doesn't just turn on family without reason. Later that evening, the smell of grilled steak drifted through our neighborhood. My parents were taking Amanda to that expensive steakhouse downtown, the one they'd never taken me to even once in my adult life. The aroma mixed with the bitterness of rejection in my throat until I thought I might vomit from the combination. If you've ever felt like the black sheep of your family, hit subscribe right now because this channel is the only place where we turn pain into power. And if you don't subscribe, maybe you've never known what betrayal feels like. Maybe you've never had to explain to your children why their own grandparents treat them like unwanted dogs at a dinner table. But here's where the story takes a turn that nobody, least of all my family, saw coming. 2 weeks later, I was folding laundry when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. Mrs. Mitchell? This is David Chin from Morrison, Chin and Associates. I need to speak with you regarding your grandparents' estate. My grandparents had died when I was in college, nearly 15 years ago. What could their estate possibly have to do with me now? I'm sorry, Mr. Chin, but I think you have the wrong person. My grandparents' estate was settled years ago. Actually, Mrs. Mitchell, that's not entirely accurate. There's been a recent development. A property deed has surfaced, and according to our research, you own a 30% share in a commercial building downtown. Your parents and sister have been collecting rent on this property for years, but legally, they needed your signature on all major decisions. They never informed you of your inheritance. The world tilted sideways. My grandparents had left me something substantial. Something my parents had hidden from me for 15 years while they profited from it. The building Mr. Chin described was worth over $2 million. My share was worth more than $600,000. There's more, Mr. Chen continued. They want to sell the building. The buyer is offering $3.5 million. But they can't proceed without your written consent and signature. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen, staring at the crayon drawings still stuck to my refrigerator. My children's artwork, bright and innocent, suddenly felt like evidence of everything my family had tried to erase. Emma's stick figure family showed 4 people holding hands under a rainbow. She'd included Grandma and Grandpa in that picture just 2 weeks ago. Jake came running through the kitchen and stopped when he saw my face. Mom? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, baby. In fact, I think things are about to get very right. That's when my phone started buzzing. First, a text from my mother. Brenda, we need to talk. It's important. Then my father called. Then Amanda. Within an hour, my voicemail was full of messages that all said the same thing in different ways. We need you. We miss you. Let's work this out. My children had overheard enough to piece together the irony. Jake looked at me with those wise eyes that children get when they've been hurt by adults and asked, "So now we matter?" Out of the mouths of babes. The power had shifted, and they could feel it in the air like the electricity before a storm. Would you take them back in after what they did to your children, or would you make them crawl? Comment below. I'll be reading every response. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly what choice I made. For the next 3 weeks, my phone became a symphony of desperation. Buzzing, ringing, chiming with notifications that I ignored with religious dedication. Each voicemail grew more frantic than the last. My mother's first message was pure manipulation. Brenda, honey, I think there was a misunderstanding. You know how Amanda gets when she's stressed. Call me back. We need to discuss some family matters. By day 10, the mask was slipping. Brenda, this is ridiculous. You're being childish. We raised you better than this. There are important decisions that need to be made. By day 20, it was pure panic. Brenda, please. Your father's been to the hospital. The stress is getting to him. Whatever you think we did wrong, we can fix it. Just call us back. My sister's texts followed a similar trajectory. Week 1, please, you know Mom didn't mean it. She was having a bad day. The kids are fine, right? Let's just move past this. Week 2, Brenda, this is bigger than whatever hurt feelings you're nursing. There are legal things happening that affect all of us. Don't be stupid about this. Week 3, you selfish bitch. Do you have any idea what you're doing to this family? Dad could lose everything because of your pride. I saved every message, every voicemail, every text. Evidence of their true nature, stripped of all pretense. Mr. Chin had become more than my lawyer. He'd become my strategic advisor. The beautiful thing about your position, he told me over coffee, is that time is on your side. The buyer won't wait forever, but they're not going anywhere this month. Let them sweat. Let them remember how it felt when they made your children sweat. The power of silence became my weapon of choice. Every ignored call was a small victory. Every unanswered text was a paper cut to their pride. I could feel them breaking down, one unreturned message at a time. They had taught me that family could hurt you worse than strangers ever could. Now I was teaching them that family could also ignore you more completely than strangers ever would. Subscribe if you agree silence can be the loudest revenge. If you don't, explain why in the comments, unless you're scared to face the truth. Because what I was doing wasn't cruel, it was educational. They were learning what it felt like to be dismissed, to be treated like you don't matter, to have your needs ignored by the people who are supposed to love you most. 3.5 weeks after that first phone call from Mr. Chin, my mother's invitation arrived. Not a text, not a voicemail. A formal, handwritten invitation on cream-colored cardstock that probably cost more than my children's lunch money for a week. Please join us for dinner to discuss recent family developments and restore harmony to our relationships. Sunday, 6 p.m. We hope you'll bring Emma and Jake. They're always welcome in our home. Always welcome. The audacity of those words made me laugh out loud. My children had gone from "they can eat scraps" to "always welcome" in less than a month. I wondered what magical transformation had occurred to change their status from unwanted guests to beloved grandchildren. I RSVP'd with a single word: yes. That Sunday, I dressed carefully. Not fancy, I didn't want them to think I was trying to impress them. But put together. Confident. I chose a simple black dress that made me look competent and serious. I helped Emma pick out her favorite blue dress with the sparkly butterflies, and Jake wore his good khakis with a button-down shirt. My children looked beautiful and loved and cared for everything they should have looked like the day my family threw us out. We drove to their house in comfortable silence, but this time it was different. This time, my children sat up straighter. They knew something had changed, even if they didn't understand exactly what. Jake had asked me that morning if Grandma was going to be mean again, and I'd told him honestly, Grandma is going to be whatever she thinks she needs to be. But we're not going there as beggars anymore. The house looked exactly the same perfectly manicured lawn, same intimidating front door, same sense of judgment emanating from every pristine surface. But when my mother opened the door, everything was different. Her smile was too bright, too wide, like a mask that didn't quite fit her face. Brenda. Oh, honey, you look wonderful. And look at these beautiful children. Come in, come in. My father appeared from the living room, his newspaper nowhere in sight. There's my girl, he said, as if he hadn't called me a servant 3 weeks ago. And my grandkids. How are you two doing? Amanda emerged from the kitchen, carrying a platter of appetizers like she was auditioning for the role of perfect hostess. Brenda, I made those little sandwiches you used to like. Remember? The ones with the cream cheese and cucumber. The performance was flawless and completely transparent. They were scared, and they were trying to rewrite history in real time. But I remembered everything. Every word. Every sneer. Every moment my children's faces fell when they realized their own family didn't want them there. Don't scroll past this. Tell me, if you walked into this dinner, would you sit in silence or strike back immediately? Because what I did next will either inspire you or shock you, but it will definitely make you understand why some bridges are meant to burn. Dinner was a masterpiece of awkward theater. We sat around the same table where my mother had declared my children unworthy of guest treatment, eating off the same china that had been too good for us just weeks before. But now my children were seated in the places of honor, next to their grandparents who fawned over them like they were visiting royalty. Emma, sweetheart, would you like more of the roast? My mother cooed, practically force-feeding my daughter. Jake, honey, try the potatoes. I made them special for you. The lies came easily to them, these people who had spent decades perfecting the art of manipulation. They talked about misunderstandings and stress and how much they'd missed us. My father told elaborate stories about his childhood, trying to bond with his grandchildren who sat politely but warily, unsure whether to trust this sudden shower of attention. Amanda outdid herself, playing the role of devoted aunt with Academy Award-worthy commitment. She asked Jake about school and Emma about her drawings, nodding enthusiastically at their careful answers. But I could see the calculation behind her eyes, the way she glanced at me every few minutes to gauge whether her performance was working. The wine flowed freely for them, not me. I needed my mind sharp and clear for what was coming. They drank and relaxed and began to believe their own performance. By the time we reached dessert, they were almost convincing themselves that this was how things had always been, that the previous month had been some kind of shared hallucination. You know, my mother said, cutting into her slice of store-bought pie as if it were a cake she'd baked herself, I've been thinking about what happened when you visited. I was going through a difficult time, dealing with some health issues, and I think I might have come across more harshly than I intended. Might have come across the language of people who never take responsibility for anything they do. My father nodded sagely, as if my mother's words were wisdom itself. We all say things we don't mean when we're under pressure. The important thing is family sticking together. Amanda raised her wine glass. To family, she said, looking directly at me. To working through our differences and remembering what really matters. They waited for me to raise my glass. They waited for me to smile and nod and accept this rewriting of history. They waited for me to become complicit in their fiction. Instead, I set down my fork and looked at each of them in turn. My children stopped eating and watched me, sensing that the moment they'd been waiting for had finally arrived. It was just a misunderstanding, my mother continued when I didn't respond to the toast. You know how things can get blown out of proportion when emotions are running high. That's when I cut them off. No. The single word fell into the conversation like a stone into still water, creating ripples of confusion across their faces. No, it wasn't a misunderstanding. You told my children they could eat scraps. You called me a servant. You made my 8-year-old daughter feel unwelcome in her grandparents' house. That wasn't stress or health issues or emotions running high. That was exactly who you are when you think there are no consequences. The silence that followed was electric. Amanda started to speak, but I held up my hand. But here's what's really beautiful about this moment. You didn't want my kids fed, but now you want me to feed your future? You wanted me to set your table like a servant, but now you need me to sign papers like an equal? No. I stood up slowly, my children immediately moving to flank me like they'd been waiting for this moment too. Servant? No. I'm the heir. And those scraps you offered my children? That's all you'll ever get from me. I turned to Emma and Jake, who were watching me with shining eyes. Come on, babies. We're going home. And we walked out. Right in the middle of their perfectly orchestrated dinner, we walked out while they sat there with their mouths open and their masks finally completely fallen. If this moment gave you chills, hit subscribe now. If you didn't feel it, prove me wrong in the comments. Why didn't it hit you? Because what happened next was even more satisfying than walking out on that pathetic dinner theater. The aftermath was swift and merciless, like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. Within a week, the carefully constructed world my family had built around their lie began to crumble. Amanda was the first to fall. Word spreads fast in professional circles when you're exposed as someone who profits from deceiving family members. Her real estate license came under review when the story reached her brokerage. Turns out, collecting rent on property you don't fully own while hiding inheritance rights from other owners isn't just morally questionable, it's legally problematic. Her biggest client, a property development firm, quietly dropped her when they realized the kind of person they'd been doing business with. I can't believe Brenda would destroy my career over this, Amanda whined to anyone who would listen. But careers built on deception and family betrayal tend to be surprisingly fragile. My parents found themselves in a legal nightmare that consumed their days and haunted their nights. Miss Sturgeon filed a formal complaint regarding the undisclosed inheritance, triggering an investigation into all their financial dealings related to my grandparents' estate. Every decision they'd made for 15 years without my knowledge was now subject to scrutiny. Every rent check they'd deposited, every expense they'd claimed, every improvement they'd made to the property, all of it had to be justified and accounted for. The buyer who had been so eager to purchase the building grew impatient with the legal complications and began looking elsewhere. $3.5 million slipped through their fingers like water because they couldn't produce a clean title. The building that had been their golden goose for 15 years became an albatross around their necks, generating legal fees instead of profits. But the most satisfying part was watching them turn on each other. When people are drowning, they'll pull down anyone within reach, even the people they claim to love. Amanda blamed our parents for not telling her about my inheritance rights. How was I supposed to know Brenda owned part of the building? You should have handled this years ago. My mother blamed my father for poor record-keeping. If you had organized the paperwork properly from the beginning, none of this would have happened. My father blamed everyone and everything except himself. This is all Brenda's fault for being vindictive. We gave her everything, and this is how she repays us. The neighbors stopped whispering about what I must have done wrong and started murmuring about what kind of people hide inheritance money from their own children. Mrs. Peterson from next door actually stopped me at the grocery store to say, "I always wondered how your parents could afford those expensive renovations." Now I guess we know. Don't just watch silently, comment justice if you think they got what they deserved. Because this wasn't revenge, this was consequences. For 15 years, they had stolen from me while treating me like I should be grateful for their scraps. Now they were learning that theft has a price, even when the thieves are your own family. 6 weeks after our dramatic dinner exit, I found myself sitting in a courthouse conference room, watching my family's lawyer shuffle through papers with the desperate efficiency of someone trying to salvage an unsalvageable situation. The court hearing was more formal proceeding than dramatic confrontation. Judge Williams, a stern woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no patience for family drama, reviewed the case with the clinical detachment that only comes from years of watching families destroy themselves over money. My parents sat across the table from me, looking like they'd aged a decade in 6 weeks. My father's usually perfect posture had collapsed into defeated slouching, and my mother's hands shook slightly as she twisted her wedding ring around and around her finger. Amanda wasn't there. Her lawyer had advised her to distance herself from the proceedings to protect her remaining professional interests. "Mrs. Mitchell," Judge Williams addressed me directly, "the court has reviewed the documentation provided by both parties. The original will and property deed clearly establish your 30% ownership in the commercial property at 1247 Morrison Street. Is it your intention to force the sale of this property?" I looked at my parents, these people who had raised me and then spent 15 years stealing from me while making me feel like I should be grateful for their attention. My father couldn't meet my eyes. My mother was crying silent tears that she probably thought would earn her sympathy. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I'm not forcing anything. I'm simply exercising my legal rights as a property owner. If my family wishes to sell, they're free to do so with my consent. If they don't wish to sell, they're free to buy out my interest at fair market value." My parents' lawyer cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my clients are prepared to offer Mrs. Mitchell $400,000 for her share of the property." I almost laughed. $400,000 for a share worth over $600,000, based on their own appraisal for the sale they wanted so desperately. "Counteroffer," Mr. Chen said smoothly. "Fair market value of $650,000, or we proceed with the sale at the previously agreed upon price of $3.5 million. Judge Williams looked at my parents. "Do you accept the counteroffer?" My father finally spoke, his voice hoarse with defeat. We don't have that kind of liquid capital available." "Then it appears the sale will proceed," the judge said, making notes in her file. "Mrs. Mitchell, do you consent to the sale at $3.5 million? This was the moment. The moment when I could choose forgiveness or justice, family loyalty or self-respect. I thought about my children, who had sat at this very family's table and been told they weren't good enough for guest treatment. I thought about 15 years of being made to feel like the family charity case while they profited from my inheritance. I looked directly at my parents and said the words I'd been practicing for weeks. "I consent to the sale. And I want it clearly noted in the record that the 30% I'm entitled to will be distributed according to the original inheritance. The scraps you left for my kids? Now that's all you'll ever get from me." Judge Williams raised an eyebrow at my comment, but made no editorial remarks. She was there to enforce the law, not mediate family drama. The gavel came down with a sound like finality itself. The sale was approved. My share would be just over $1 million. My parents would split the remaining $2.5 million if they could cover the legal fees, back taxes, and penalties that had accumulated during their years of mismanagement. I stayed silent through the rest of the proceedings, only nodding when required to acknowledge my understanding. There was power and composure in letting my presence speak louder than my words. I was no longer the desperate daughter begging for acceptance at their table. I was a property owner exercising my legal rights. I was a mother who had protected her children from people who would hurt them. I was a woman who had finally learned that sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you deserve. Subscribe if you love poetic justice. If not, comment below why you'd still forgive people who destroyed you. Because forgiveness isn't always healing. Sometimes it's just enabling people to hurt you again. 3 months later, I stood on the courthouse steps with the afternoon sun warming my face and my children on either side of me, their small hands tucked securely in mine. The legal battle was over. The money was in my account. The people who had treated my babies like unwanted strays were learning to live with the consequences of their choices. Emma looked up at me with those wise 8-year-old eyes and asked, "Mommy, are we going to see Grandma and Grandpa anymore?" It was a fair question. The kind of question that cuts straight to the heart of what family means and what we're willing to tolerate in the name of blood relations. "I don't know, sweetheart," I told her honestly. "They haven't asked to see us." And it was true. In all the weeks of legal proceedings, phone calls about money, and text messages about property transfers, not once had any of them asked about Emma and Jake. Not once had they inquired about their grandchildren's well-being or expressed regret for the way they'd treated them. The money mattered. The property mattered. The children who had been hurt in their own home? They never mattered at all. Jake squeezed my hand tighter. "It's okay, Mom. We don't need them." Out of the mouths of babes, once again. My 10-year-old son had figured out what it took me 34 years to learn. We don't need people who make us smaller. We don't need family members who treat us like burdens. We don't need love that comes with conditions and withdraws the moment we fail to meet impossible standards. We walked to our car, the reliable sedan I'd been able to pay off completely with a small portion of my inheritance, and drove home to our house, which was now mortgage-free and truly ours. No hidden owners. No secret beneficiaries. No family members profiting from our hard work without our knowledge. That evening, as I tucked my children into their beds in their beautiful, safe rooms, Emma asked me one more question. "Are we still a family, even without Grandma and Grandpa?" I kissed her forehead and smoothed her hair. "Baby girl, we were never more of a family than we are right now." And it was true. They had called my children outsiders, unwelcome guests in their own grandparents' home. Now we were outsiders by choice, and for the first time in my life, that felt like freedom. We were free from the obligation to accept disrespect in the name of family loyalty. Free from the need to make ourselves smaller to fit into spaces where we weren't wanted. Free from the crushing weight of trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it unconditionally. My family, my real family, the two beautiful souls sleeping peacefully in their beds, was complete. We had each other, we had security, and we had self-respect. We had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to teach your children that they should accept cruelty from people who claim to love them. The people who raised me taught me that family comes first, no matter what. But my children taught me something better. Family should make you feel safe, valued, and loved. If it doesn't do that, then it's not really family at all. It's just people who happen to share your DNA and think that entitles them to hurt you without consequences. So, what would you have done in my place? Would you have forgiven them for the sake of keeping the family together? Would you have accepted their apologies and let your children learn that it's okay to be treated as less than? Or would you have done exactly what I did, chosen your children over the people who hurt them, chosen self-respect over family obligation, chosen the family you created over the family that created you? Drop your answer in the comments. Don't walk away without telling me what you would have chosen, because silence only strengthens the people who want to keep hurting you. And if this story made you think differently about what family means, hit subscribe, Because there are more stories like this, more people who need to know they're not alone, more families who need to learn that love shouldn't leave bruises on your soul. The truth is, some bridges are meant to burn. Some relationships are meant to end. Some families are meant to be redefined by the people we choose to keep close rather than the people we happen to be related to. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away from the table where they're serving scraps and build your own feast with people who actually want to feed you. My name is Brenda. I'm 34 years old. And I'm finally free.